All right, I'll call this meeting to order. Please join me in salute to the flag. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Maybe seated. All right, public participation. This is limited to the items described in the notice. We will keep public participation open so you can ask questions throughout the meeting. Is there anyone that would like to address the council right now? Seeing none, moving on, declaration of conflicts of interest and disqualifications, looking left and right, seeing none. Moving on to our budget workshop, council will review and discuss financial information as it relates to the fiscal year 2017-18 and 18-19 adopted budgets, including non-general fund prioritized departmental augmentation requests and any other matter that may fall within the city's budgetary scope. Director Jacobs-Hunter.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. There it is. I'm sorry. That's for later. Thank you. All right. Let me see. Is this going to start my slideshow right here, I think? Oh, wait. Oh, I have to do it up there. Thank you, Stacy. But that's okay, we can stay on there. Tonight we have our budget workshop regarding the non-general fund prioritized departmental budget augmentation request. That's a long sentence. The last budget workshop we had, we went over the general fund augmentation requests from the departments. And so this is just the remaining funds which we just consider non-general fund. Each department head will be coming up and giving a short presentation regarding their non-general fund requests. And I am going to start. And please stop me at any time. I don't have that many, but if you have any questions. All right. Items that I have are the, we needed to put an electronic lock to the payroll department, or we need to, I'm sorry, put an electronic lock to payroll department. So I was asking for the funds out of the small equipment, appropriating them. That's Fund 240. And then out of Fund 240, there was the security upgrades for the Human Resource Lobby, which was $4,878. And the additional request for the electronic door locks for payroll is $4,500. Right now, they don't have electronic locks. I get to carry keys in electronic. So, does anyone have any questions? There are funds set aside in Fund 240 to fund these items. All right. Police Department's next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the Police Department, under Fund 202, the first item under line augmentation number 7, you'll notice that we have overtime request for additional funding for 17-18 in the amount of $4,000, and for 18-19 an additional amount of $3,000. This fund is funded through the bicycle licensing fees. It's monies that are already there. It can only be utilized for specific items in relations to bicycle safety, bicycle rodeos, overtime for those rodeos, and all education type incidences that we fund through overtime through our bike patrol unit is funded through this. So the money's there for it, just asking for additional funds in overtime. Questions regarding item number 7? For the police department, moving down to items 8 and 9, $10,000 and $7,500. We had made requests to move those funds from 240 into the expense line account of 240. We've removed that request. The whole idea of those amounts of money going into line 240 was to build a savings account, not to spend every year. So we've removed them, so they'll stay in the 240 line item under those accounts. So it's a negative 17.5 you're seeing there. That's for 18-19, 17-18 we don't have anything. The COPS grant is cleanup. The COPS grant, as was explained by Captain Williams in the previous City Council meeting and what's been explained in our workshops, it's just a funding cleanup where we moved $57,995 out of our salary back in the COPS grant because COPS grant started 3 or 4 months after the date, and when we ended on the calendar year when we should have ended in April because we started 3 months late, so it's just a cleanup. Moving on to items 11, police vehicle replacement. You'll see that we're asking for additional $104,000 going into the vehicle replacement fund. This is based on the additional officers we asked for under our general fund augmentation we had last city council meeting. As we explained in the budget workshop and the retention recruitment workshop, for every 2 officers and 1 support officer plan, that 9-year plan, it requires an expenditure in order to purchase vehicles. We'll be looking for 4 officers, so that's 2 vehicles. Each officer is approximately $75,000, $52,000 for the vehicle, fully equipped, and approximately $23,000 for the officer's equipment, vest, weapons, etc. So that total amount of $104,000 is for the 4 officers in our general fund request. Moving on to item number 12. Any questions on that? I'm sorry. Moving on to item number 12, vehicle equipment replacement, again, funds. We're asking, this is in addition to the community service officer's vehicle, purchasing another vehicle, as was explained previously, but for those who weren't here at those meetings, our community service officers had to be switched from a 411 schedule because we learned that they cannot work a 411 schedule because of FSLA rules. They were moved to a 410. MOU requirements and scheduling resulted in overlap with no vehicle. So we're basically sending 2 community service officers in 1 vehicle or trying to put them in the station. Well, that's not working too well because the whole idea was we could start utilizing them for parking enforcement, bringing them downtown. We can't do that. We need that extra vehicle. So that's why that amount is in there. That's all I have. Questions?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The items for Parks, Recreation, and Public Facilities begin at augmentation request number 13. And the item that you see before you is in regard to a cleanup item relative to an action that council took back in 2017 with resolution 2017-023, and this is when council decided to co-sponsor the Tournament of Champions for CSUS. And so while that action was taken, the budgeting of that particular expenditure was not included in the budget. So we're asking that we take care of that cleanup through this particular action. Moving on to the Fund 217 Streets gas tax expenses. There are 2 items there. We're asking you to consider a $9,000 expenditure increase to our general supply line number. This is primarily for the use of a pothole filler that we've been using. It gives us, it's a little bit more expensive, but it allows us to have a little bit more permanent patch. When we don't have hot mix available, we do have this particular product, and it gives us a much longer lasting repair. If we use regular old cold mix, the first rain that comes around, we generally see all that work lost, but this new product allows us to have a much longer repair. So that's what you're seeing there is a request for $9,000 to our supply line number. You also see in the streets as well as later in the assessment districts and storm, an increase to our tree trimming. This is similar to what we talked about with the general fund areas where if council were to consider an increase there, it would just allow us to maintain that many more trees in those particular public spaces. Moving down to augmentation 16, the recreation grants for PAL. We simply need to have an expenditure line number created. Those expenses are actually offset by revenue that's generated by PAL, which is a separate nonprofit organization. And so in order for us to be able to buy supplies and things related to the program, we just need a line number set up to have some expenditures. A more critical conversation I think that we need to have is in regard to augmentation 17, 18, and 19. And those are out of the capital improvements for Fund 301. You'll see that I've prioritized two of those as level ones. The first one being the Columbia Pool Facility. I spoke briefly about it during our workshop in that we really need to spend some time evaluating the existing facility. I don't have to tell you, it's end of life. It appears to be drawing near. We have major maintenance that needs to take place at the facility, and rather than put a Band-Aid on it, and we really think we need to do a comprehensive review of the facility. We have not only a deteriorating swimming pool, but we have challenges with ADA requirements and many other structural issues that really need some attention. Our recommendation at this point is to earmark some funding so that we can hire an architect to come in and do an evaluation. And I think part of that, it really is a broader community conversation about what they want to see in this facility. And so we're asking council to consider earmarking some funds specifically for that purpose. It's urgent. We anticipate that we can move forward this coming summer and have our regular aquatics programming. But I will say that maintenance staff is concerned. There are portions of the pool where the plaster is failing. And so we really think that the time is now to really start looking closely at this issue. Moving down to the senior center, we have, as you know, that's pretty much our remaining major community facility for the city and community to use, and therefore it's really been the focus for us in terms of our maintenance. I know that council's made some investments over the last few years in terms of, some of the renovations, replace the ceiling tiles, things of that nature. Now we've got a portion of the roof that needs some serious repairs, and so in order to prevent any further damage, we're asking council to consider funding that project. And then finally, we did categorize this as a priority 2. It's the replacement of the Rotary Park playground structure. We're hoping that through a combination of grant funding as well as community support that we can fund that, but we felt we needed to make you aware in case any of those fall short. Moving down to storm basin maintenance, this is a bit of a cleanup. We're asking to re-budget for some supplies that were inadvertently left out in the last 2-year budget in the amount of $7,000. That's in the Storm Fund 410 account. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, the tree trimming. We would like to increase that for the storm area as well in the amount of $2,000. That wraps up my requests, but I would like to add that I will probably be coming up when Manager Pishano comes up to speak on development services, because we have requests relative to SB1. Do you have any questions?
Just to confirm, Allison, we are talking about, as it stands now, with the little wing and a prayer, making it through the summer season for the pool?
Yes, that's what I said. So we have no concerns this summer. We'll run our regular aquatics programming. However, we see some critical issues that are, creeping up on us. And so, like I said, we're kind of putting Band-Aids on things, but it's really a question of, do we want to keep dumping money into making these patches, if you will, or do we want to take a comprehensive look at this facility? Given its age, given the amount of use that it gets, and given its importance to that particular part of our community, I think that it's well worth the time, an investment for council to consider some type of closer review of those issues. We also heard loud and clear from our community when we did the recreation feasibility study. That's an important amenity, and while the idea of a brand new multi-million-dollar aquatics facility is probably not realistic, we do know that we need to take steps to make sure that we hang on to what we have now. So that's really what the request is from myself and my department at this point is, allocating some resources to do a comprehensive review of that facility to figure out how best to move forward in the future.
So a typical picture might look like make it through the summer season, drain it, evaluate it, complete the work, be prepared for summer 19.
I think it's more about an overall view of that facility, because as I mentioned, it's not just the swimming pool.
Okay.
It's the locker room facilities, the bathrooms. It's kind of we need to look at that facility in totality and its relationship to the park and the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, Allison, on this, the pool, does it pay for itself, or does it cost us money? What, do you know, can you give me a breakdown on expenses versus income?
I can't give you an exact number off the top of my head, but I can tell you that it does not cover its expenses. Between the cost to staff it with lifeguards and concession staffing to teach swim lessons, and then also the whole maintenance component of it, it doesn't come anywhere close to covering its costs. It's been recognized over the years that there is a value to this facility, and it's something that the city, I think, has touched on, in the past. It's been a very passionate conversation. Anytime we've even tried to raise the entry fee just a little bit to try to close that gap, we've not gotten that support. And so, we've heard that message loud and clear that the community, that's one of those things that the community wants to see made available to as many users as possible, despite the fact that it doesn't have that ability to cover all of its costs through revenue. No other questions? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My section of the budget starts at number 22. The augmentations for the current fiscal year are primarily based on this year's employee negotiations, resulting in increased salaries and benefits. And also one minor technical item, we're going through the adoption of our integrated voice response, which will be a new electronic phone system for the utility billing department. So you can call in 24/7, 365, pay your bill, get your account balance, find out what you owe, and other information. That should go live in May. When the council approved the project, the report said it would be funded equally out of two funds, Water Quality Control and Water Enterprise. We did not include in the resolution the money from Water Enterprise. It's just a technical correction. So it looks like an augmentation, but you did authorize that spending. And then going on to next year, we kind of lumped these together, starting at number 24 into kind of personnel issues. So we have a vacant lead plant operator position at the wastewater treatment facility. We wish to leave open and fill at a lower level, so there'll be some salary savings there. We have a new manager and a new supervisor there, and this is their kind of new organizational structure. We have a vacant utility manager position. It's been vacant for about a year now. There's three positions in our department, and one's been vacant for a while. We don't want to fill that right now as we work towards the surface water project and some other things, trying to find the right fit or right structure for our department. So leaving that open, we do recommend the reclassification of an employee to deputy director. That's a reestablishment of that position based on the work duties assigned to that person. Another requirement will be to reclassify an existing lab analyst from senior to lab supervisor. That's to create a new position which is required under new state laboratory accreditation licensing standards, which says the water quality control manager cannot sign lab reports anymore because it's a potential conflict of interest. So if they have an issue at the wastewater treatment plant, not here, but there will be a temptation for someone to maybe fudge the numbers with an independent person signing those reports. That could not be the case. We also recommend converting 2 part-time clerical positions to 1 full-time position using those salary savings, although there will be a slight net increase. And then as we move forward to chlorination, wellhead treatment, and the surface water project, your new rate structure did include the addition of 3 new utility workers, and over the next year or two, bringing those 3 employees on board. So those are my personnel issues that are covered through 24 through 27 and also 34. And then going back a bit to 28, services in 410, which is water quality control. adding a data management system for the lab. This is called LIMS, Laboratory Management Services. We're required to do that now. Additional costs for recycling our biosolids, and additional regulatory fees because we have now 2 discharge locations, one in the San Joaquin River and in the near future the Delta Mendota Canal. Some additional studies we have to do for our MPDS permits, that's our wastewater permits, expanding our existing electronic work order system, which has made us much more efficient, and also we've started to outsource our engineering services. So most of our projects are now designed by AECOM out of Fresno. The city's engineering department had been doing that work for us for many years, but with the Measure L Prop 1 work, they're mainly committed to roadway projects now. So in order to keep utility projects moving, the council authorized that contract with AECOM at the end of last year. And that's working out very well right now. On the capital side, it starts at number 36, and I'll just I could go through each project, but I get excited about them, but most people don't. Just to give you a big picture item, so in our water quality control and sewer master plans, we project about a $40 million need in capital projects in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, so most of the wastewater treatment facility was built in 1976, or at least the kind of core components. They're reaching the end of their useful life, and also new regulatory standards require constant upgrades too. We have reserves right now of about $26 million, so we'll be spending those down the next 2 to 4 years. And as we work over the next year or two, we'll start looking at potential rate increases in the sewer fund if we're going to maintain that capital program. So I thought I'd give you a heads up there. But again, that's our reserves right now are $26 million for this. So for these next couple of budgets, there will no need for augmentation or revenue changes. And then most of these projects listed here are carryover from 2018. And there may be a couple of projects not listed here that are currently in design. We'll be going out to bid soon. Whether we get those projects completed this fiscal year or next, it may mean reappropriating some funds from this year to next year. But again, no net impact to those funds. Moving on to 420, which is the Water Enterprise Fund that starts at item 57. The cost of chlorination as we move to wellhead treatment and also surface water. Just to let you know, the reserves in Fund 420 right now are $31 million, which is good. The drinking water project will cost us $150 million. That includes local improvements of $20 million, which we want to cash fund using those reserves. So that's new water mains, new water storage tank, and some other stuff. So we'll be quickly spending down reserves, and as the new rates go into effect, we'll be using those to finance the project through low-interest loans from the state. So again, I haven't shown that budgeted in here because we need to get further in design and then go out to bid, and then we can start budgeting that real money. But there will be things like consultant fees, professional services coming up in the next year or two. Once we get a better handle on those costs, we'll add those to the budget. And then just towards the end of the request there, starting 50, 51, and 61, the vehicle purchases a new aerial truck, which is a bucket lift truck we share with the streets department for either pruning trees or maintaining street lights or amending traffic signals. Also a new hydro cleaner, which is we call it a vac truck. It's a garbage truck with a shop vac on the back, industrial sized shop vac. We use that for cleaning sewer lines and storm lines. Our existing one's over 25 years old, reached the end of its useful life and costing more to maintain than to buy a new one. And also investing in a new television van. We use that to CCTV the sewer laterals and storm lines as part of our preventive maintenance program. So about over a 5-year period, we televise every sewer line in Turlock, noting its condition, and then we use that to go back and either do enhanced cleaning or capital projects. And again, that's a mandate of state law. So I know it's an expensive budget. It's very capital intensive. I was just doodling in the back in our wastewater fund. Salaries and benefits are about 28% of our expenses. 72% is operations and capital. So it's kind of the flip side of a police budget or a fire department budget, which is very labor intensive. We're the other way around. So that explains kind of the high volume of the costs. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So when you're talking about that one truck with the bucket and that you're sharing, is part of the cost, are you taking all the costs?
No.
Or is it split out 50%?
It gets split out. I'm hoping it's in here. We do basically a share based on how much we use it. And it's not in here, but it's paid out of two funds, and I can follow up and get that for you. But basically, look at the number of hours each department uses it, and then split up the cost that way.
So if you got your funding out of the enterprise funds and there weren't any to come from the general fund, then we get a smart car? I mean, what do you do?
No, so you've got, landscape assessment districts uses it too. And then some of the funding, because we maintain traffic signals with it, comes out of the streets fund.
Okay.
So there are other non-general fund sources that aren't, water or wastewater to help fund that vehicle.
Yes, Councilmember Deere.
I don't want to jump too far down into the weeds on this, Michael, but I want to confirm something that you said. Did I understand you to say that the inspection requirements that we have for wastewater, we're actually spending now twice?
Right.
Here locally, and then at the outlet at Delta Mendota?
Okay, so the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, NPDS, requires you to have a permit for each discharge into a surface water of the United States. So we discharge into one location right now at the San Joaquin River. In the future, we're building the North Valley Pipeline, which will take our recycled water to the Delta Mendota Canal. So then we'll have that location, and then the river will then be a backup location. In case that we have a pump station go down to Modesto, we can still discharge to the river. Because we have to maintain two permits now, our regulatory fees basically double under that program.
So does that end up being a cost share with Modesto?
Our discharge of the Delta Mendota Canal, yes, we do share some of those costs. Our discharge to San Joaquin River, we pay 100% of that cost.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thanks, Michael.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Catch that right now. The modifications to the development services requesting are kind of considered multifold. Essentially, they're either related to the basic needs of the department, SB1 related items, or personnel changes that would allow the division to more flexibility to use the personnel that we're trying to use. So one of the first item 62 in Fund 216, is City Engineering Services. This is actually associated with the funding of a personnel change request for a traffic technician in the Fund 502. So I'll kind of hit back at that at line 84, just kind of giving you a hint that we'll come back to it. Second item is Measure L. This one here with the adoption of Resolution 21805, all the fiscal year 17-18 benefits for the Measure L employees have been moved to Fund 502. This is part of a cleanup item is really what it is. So really there's no change here in funding, so this is just part of cleanup. So this request mirrors the budget for fiscal year 17-18 and not only moves the personnel expenses to the Fund 502, but also moves all the personnel revenues to the Fund 502 and allows the Measure L personnel to utilize the engineering division's approved indirect cost rate. So we're charging those Measure L projects. Next, we're going to talk about SB1. If Allison, want to come up here? So the first item is item 64. This is a minor modification to the projection of the total anticipated funds. It's a projection in the long run, so it's just a minor modification. But items 65 through 70 is really what I want kind of Allison here to be a part of. In general, the SB1 revenue has the ability for community road maintenance, and it's allowable expense under the SB1 revenue. As such, we have the opportunity to have labor and equipment for pothole repairs and maintenance of thermoplastic roadway markings covered through this funding source. Any positions created would allow the public facilities maintenance the opportunity to expand their pothole repair team and ultimately allow them to be a little more proactive in addressing various hazards in the road. Maybe Allison might want to put some in here.
Please, thank you. Mayor and Council, as I spoke to this issue at the workshop, this is really a unique opportunity, I think, that we have as a city to utilize this funding source to do some proactive maintenance of our roads. And while we are grateful and thankful to have Measure L and obviously we have our Fund 217 gas tax funds to do ongoing maintenance. It was not understood when SB1 became available that it could actually be used for the type of maintenance that I oversee for the city. And what I'm talking about is your daily pothole maintenance, your thermoplastic, things that we hear about, in particular with the potholes, things that we hear about practically on a daily basis, especially after a good rain, right? And so I am urging you to look closely at this, because we know that we are only as effective as we can be with a very limited amount of resources right now. We are not proactive in terms of your daily street maintenance. We are reactive. With this infusion of funds for 2 more staff, pothole supplies, a pothole trailer, a thermoplastic trailer and supplies, we could essentially have a 2-pronged approach where you would have our larger projects being handled by our development services team. But then you'd also have a team in your maintenance division who is going out basically every workday performing road maintenance under the SB1 revenue. And so that is something unique. I see a great ability for us to focus not only on our major thoroughfares, which is really what we're doing now, and then, you know, filling in a pothole here or there in a neighborhood as we get the complaint or request. But what we'd like to be able to do with this funding and hiring the additional staff is create a second pothole team that could be sort of like our neighborhood pothole team, if you will. So you'd have major thoroughfares being taken care of daily, neighborhoods being taken care of daily, in addition to your major projects. We feel like this is something that we've not had the opportunity, you know, available to us. And so now that we know that that funding can be used in that way, not just for projects, we really want you to consider that and look into that. Other communities have done that. That's how that came to our attention. We heard of other cities that were hiring more street staffing, and we said, hey, wait a minute, I thought you can only use this for projects. Well, we've learned more, and so now that we've learned more, we're asking council to consider that, and I know that this has been included on the project list for next year for your consideration. So I'm passionate about it, as you can tell. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes.
So it'll cover employee benefits, everything?
Yes, we have, I'm saying we, but engineering staff did look into this issue when that information came to our attention, and they did some more research and confirmed that it can be used to pay for staffing as well as equipment and supplies.
Councilmember DeHart, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think, one of the magazines I was looking at, I think it was from Caltrans, showed a truck where one person will operate it to repair potholes. Eliminates the 2 or 3 man crew setting up. So you just got the truck, you essentially go over the potholes, fix them, and go. I'm just wondering, now that you're talking about SB1 and equipment, I wonder, is this something we might want to look at? For the equipment, if we can get equipment funds from SB1, would that be something to consider? That would almost triple our pothole. If you got one person operating a truck where one guy's doing all the potholes, you could just do that for a certain allotment of time.
So we didn't propose a truck because we have a patch truck already. What we were looking at is a pothole trailer that would allow us some more flexibility. There's a lot of setup that goes along with using the patch truck, which is what you observed when you came out with our crews. And so keeping in mind that the other part that I didn't really talk about, and I apologize, but I'll talk about it now, is that not only would these additional 2 staffing address potholes, but they would also address our thermoplastic, which is our striping material. We have regular paint, but we know that the life cycle on regular old paint is not very long. Thermoplastic allows us a much longer lifespan. And so when we hear from council that there's a priority on high visibility crosswalks, we would love to be able to do those using the thermoplastic because they're nice and bright and they last a long time as compared to paint. And so when we talk about like that idea of maybe buying another patch truck, we're a little bit limited because that's basically all they would do is work on the truck. We'd like to have a more flexible team of 2 people that can spend time doing potholes as well as thermoplastic. And we believe that having the pothole trailer and the thermo trailer are the best strategies in order to give us the most flexibility. But we are open to looking at all of these options. Like I said, this is relatively new information to us that this funding can be used for staffing and equipment, and so we wanted to bring this to your attention so that you can factor this into your decision making.
Yeah, and the reason, and I understand that, and the reason I thought of this truck when you started talking about equipment is because this would make it a one-man job, which would free up some of your other crew for these other jobs. That's what I was looking at, so maybe it's something to consider.
Yeah, like I said, we're open to looking into everything. I would guess to say that the cost of a patch truck would probably be triple the cost of a trailer, and so we'd have to factor all of those things in. But I appreciate the ideas on how we could be more efficient, and we're happy to sit down and discuss what the best option is for the department and the city.
So, just a couple concerns. Inclement weather, they wouldn't be working. Are they part-time employees? And as well, if at the life of the tax doesn't continue, are we encumbered with employees and benefits and et cetera?
So to answer your first question about inclement weather, so we currently have a streets team that does maintenance all year round. And so if it's a particular day where either hot mix isn't available or it doesn't make sense to fill potholes because it's raining, we have a multitude of street-related tasks, all of which are covered under SB1. So while we're focusing on the high benefit of this being potholes and thermo, median landscaping is covered, sign replacement is covered. Anything that's related to the streets component is an eligible expense. So I hope that answers that question. And then in terms of what happens with the tax, you're absolutely right. It is a bit of a gamble. We don't know what is going to happen, but that's, I think, I'm not the expert in terms of what's going to happen and that type of thing, and it is something that we should be cautious about. However, at the very least, some of the one-time expenses, maybe the purchasing of the equipment, is something to consider in the short term and then see how things progress. Again, primarily I wanted to be able to have this conversation with council because it's different than what you were presented with last year when all of the projects were brought to you. It was presented to you at that time because it was our understanding as staff that it was to be primarily used for projects. And so now that we have clarification and we have examples of other communities that have used this for staffing and equipment, we thought you needed to know that as well.
Thank you.
And as Allison also alluded to, there's going to be an item at the next council meeting, this evening's council meeting, discussing the actual project list, and her items actually will be included within that project list. Just want to make sure that that does dovetail in. Continuing on with the SB1 revenue, we have some transfers out for the federally funded projects, which will be part of that project list, and keep the other allowable expenses going along with that. So and we also have an actual SB1 based project that will be financed entirely by that. We'll get that list to you here later this evening. Under line 72, we have capital projects. Again, that's one I already mentioned. Next, we moved to Fund 228, line 73. Line 73 and 74 are very similar in their nature. They both have to do with the Parks Master Plans. At this point in time, our Parks Master Plans are significantly outdated and are in need of being updated so that they become legally defensible again. And so we have some kind of concerns with that. And with that needs, we actually do have some possible funding. We anticipate carrying over a certain amount of our budgeted funds from 17-18, 18-19. And that's part of it. And then similar to that in line 74, we're anticipating carrying over $4,000 for that purpose. So this is part of the basic planning of our community, keeping our Parks Master Plan up to date and managed so that when the time comes for us to charge fees to the various developers, we have something that has a quality nexus and becomes legally defensible. Fund 241, Assessment Replacement and Plan Department. Here, we're just replacing a planning, a scanner. We're just carrying that over for next year, so if we could carry that over. Fund 425, Fixed Route, line 76. This is to replace our traffic transportation supervisor, an individual that actually carries two functions, with just a transit manager. This is part of the changes that we're trying to deal with. We have our transit facility getting ready to be occupied here later this fall, possibly as late as January. At that point in time, we have this individual who's going to be leaving and coming over there, becoming a full-time transit manager. This will be wholly funded through the transit funds itself, so this is notable that it doesn't affect the engineering department in any way, but it does affect the transit funds. Again, now we have Fund 425, the transit fixed route. Here again, it's whoops, confusing myself. Okay, line 77, 78 transfers out for funds 205 and 206, the park and ride. Originally, Pedretti parking lot was originally supported through the transit. Part of this transfer was because they utilized the parking lot. At this point in time, the nexus is no longer there for us to have transit supporting that parking lot. So it's time for us to actually remove that support. That's again, we're just trying to keep ourselves in defensible situations. Fixed route expenses, line 79. Again, this is that same idea that I mentioned earlier about the transportation supervisor and transit manager. Current allocation of the transit manager is held in the engineering fund. This will, then I'm going to discuss a little more in lines 84 and 85, which is actually within the engineering revenue. Fund 502, engineering revenue, line 80, has been adjusted. This is just an adjustment for the Measure L. We hear numbers of 1.2 million. We are in 1.221 million. We're just trying to get it something in line so we have something to keep us moving here. As I mentioned very early in this conversation, the moving the Measure L employees to the from Fund 218 to the Fund 502, this is really just a management of the funds. There's really not any expenses in this. This is the idea that we can bill properly to the funds. We can use the rates that we already have established. And so what it does is it functionally, it helps the accounting processes flow a lot better. Where we had things separately, we'd have to have separate processes. This is we're just trying to keep the processes together. And this started clear back in the fall of last year. And this is really just a cleaning up of that particular item. Let's see. Line 84 again is talking about that traffic transportation supervisor with the transit manager. Repeated this before, but I kind of want to note that the funding for the position is being revised from 30% engineering, 35% fixed route, and 35% dollar ride to 75% funded from the transit fix and 25% from dollar ride. So it's like I mentioned a minute ago, the entire funding is out of transit. And that's, again, a key point there. Now, the item that also is associated with this, as I noted before, this person is actually doing two functions. So line 84 is a traffic engineering position. A traffic engineering position is something that the city of Turlock, at one time, we had 2 traffic engineers. Right now, we're funding about a half of a traffic engineer. And this is really important. This is a community-wide concern. We constantly being asked, can you check my stops? Do I need a stop sign here? Can we use a signal here? These kind of things, red curbs, the various items that affect everybody within the community. And at this point in time, we're significantly behind in responding to these inquiries just because we don't have the staff. And as I mentioned, now we have the staff member that's doing this position part-time, leaving engineering essentially, and moving entirely to transit. So we're looking for actually a full-time traffic position. And this would be in a technician position. It's not an engineering position or an engineer position, but it's actually a technician level position that would be supervised through the city engineer himself. So they would be reviewing traffic control plans, work orders, permits, conduct speed safety surveys, in general traffic. This is actually, I think, a community-wide question again, and that's why I'm really kind of something that really needs to be taken care of. And it just faded away, when the economy got worse and worse. Now it's time to put it back in. Line 86, part-time help, we've lost some employees, we need our part-time help kind of cleaned up there in the engineering division. 87, vacation conversion pay. Again, we have this to cover the cash outs of the retirements and personnel departures that the engineering has. Line 88 is the consulting city surveyor. As of last July, we lost the city surveyor, so we do not actually have any surveyor staff on board at this point in time. So we've been utilizing our consultants for that process and filling our needs at this time. It's really something that the city should consider, have a need to be filled. But at this point in time, we're using the consultants. And so again, due to these unforeseen departures, we need to continually fund these consulting city surveyors. And then the last one I believe I have here is line 89, which is our telephone data plan. This is just a part of nature that we have here. As all of us are quite familiar, our phones are becoming more and more part of our actual appendages. And as that, the data plans are continually needing to grow because it's how we communicate. It's how the engineering department actually manages their projects, the project management systems that we utilize, where we communicate through our contractor, where we keep all of our records on. We have all that communication. So when it comes time for that basic question of, is there a change order involved? How do we communicate that? Is there truly some information that needs to be taken care of? And any questions for development services?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have the lines 90 through 101. This is in regard to Housing Program Services. The first fund is Fund 255, that's the CDBG fund. As Council might remember, that when the 17-18 budget was adopted, that under the federal ongoing authority, we were not given complete or accurate numbers with regard to what those entitlement grant amounts would be. And as such, certain expenses are classified as administrative, some are in project delivery, and that we must maintain we can't spend more than 20% of the grant on administrative. So we have to adjust based on the grant amount. So the items that are before you, obviously line 90 reflects the actual. And once again, we don't have an accurate number for 18-19. We should, but we don't. Just kind of how the federal environment is operating. And then the expenses 91, 92 through 98 are just adjustments based on the grant amounts and what was contained in our annual action plan. Fund 256, the Stanislaus County Consortium, for which the City of Turlock is the participating jurisdiction. Again, that's the cleanup for the revenue grant amount. And then items relative to administrative and oversight adjustments based on the actual grant amounts received. We're in that same position again, and we'll be back mid-year for 18-19, probably once the federal entitlement amounts are actually provided to by HUD. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay.
That concludes all the department's requested augmentations for non-general fund. Is there any further questions? Since this is a workshop, no formal action will be taken. We will return to you on May 8th on the regular agenda, and there will be an item put before council to consider adoption of these. Any questions?
Any final questions from the council or the audience on this workshop? All right, I'll close public participation and bring it back to council. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Dehart, second by Councilmember Bublak. All those in favor say aye. All right, we're adjourned. We will come back in about 10 minutes.